Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Frank Fritz is the name connected to searching for odd antiques and lost gems. However, behind the picture of an unassuming man who is enthusiastic about the wonder of old things has never been made public unless individuals enter his home. Seemingly innocuous objects, for long years the rooms were closed. Then a revelation that left everyone stunned. Nobody could have anticipated that concealed. There was a truth among those dusty artifacts that might alter our perspective on this man will always be there. Are you prepared to take action? Within, the things you discover will make you unable to take your eyes, music away. Frank Fritz was discovered dead on the floor of his bathroom. Nobody could have foreseen the actual horror that awaited behind his garage door, which is rusty. The seemingly deserted area struck a multi-million-dollar gold mine. About 75 antique motorcycles, includes an uncommon Indian chief from 1947 prototype, which is worth $250,000. But it's not the only thing that has antique hunters were in a state of shock. Within, there's also a long-lost tour van for Aerosmith and a Star Wars prototype Yoda, a product something George Lucas himself thought had demolished. However, the most shocking isn't the wealthiest collection of artifacts. The handwritten journals are what it is, displaying the eerie truth on the last days of Frank Fritz. Are you prepared to enter this unknown world tale? If you enjoyed watching Frank Fritz, put 1 in the comments section. If you're feeling type 0, in other words, remember to give the station a like and a subscribe so you don't pass up any unexpected disclosures. The music begins. Numerous individuals have never owned money and consequently, they never think about money. Significant. They are indifferent to your assets since to them, cash has never been essential. Frank Fritz is among those individuals. However, what shocked everyone wasn't his lack of concern for money, but the hidden gem that he left behind. Additional more than 75 classic motorbikes, a distinctive Indian chief's lost tour, Aerosmith, 1947 bus, as well as a prototype Yoda that was believed to have vanished forever. However, his scrawls contain the true secret. Journals that disclose suffering, treachery, and the actual cause of Frank's termination from pickers from America, and more significantly, someone attempted to steal his $6 million luck. The birthplace of Frank Fritz was Iowa's Davenport in 1963. At an early age, he was distinct. While other children were occupied using baseball cards and bicycles, Frank filled his room with rocks in silence, old beer cans, stamps, and coins. His Bill and Susan, their parents, believed their son had an odd pastime. However, to Frank, each antique has a backstory, an irreplaceable worth. He even gathered. His notebooks contain paper clips, a little behavior that demonstrated his exceptional, the capacity to recognize worth where others did not. Garbage. Frank even became fixated with it. Razor blades, a peculiarity at the period, although currently regarded as an early expression of his preference for searching for hidden treasure in the dark. Frank went to Pseudolo as an adult. Bettendorf High School after high school, where Mike Wolfe had a momentous encounter transformed his life. Mike, who would eventually become into his on-screen companion, and Frank in 8th grade, they quickly became friends. The two of them started looking for treasure every weekend. From garage auctions in backyards to dusty flea marketplaces. Both of them were seeming captivated with antiques, insignificant items that had a tally of magic, despite the fact that many educators thought Frank had a lot of potential. In his educational journey, he decided to take an alternative route. College wasn't where he discovered the most important teachings in life. Frank believed that genuine knowledge was only made when he came into contact with antiques, listened to historical tales, and recognized the worth they contributed. Following after graduating, Frank was a firefighter, inspector in charge of safety inspections across a big portion of Iowa. He held the position for about 25 years. However, his love of antiques persisted to burn and even became more powerful over time. While still a teenager, Frank started assembling motorbikes. At 16 years old, he spent all of his money to purchase a 1964 Harley Davidson for over $4,000, which at the time was a significant amount. His parents were taken aback by this audacious choice. Frank, however, thought the bike was more than a car alone. It was our presentation of time, a live remembrance of America. He put forth a lot of effort at businesses, such as Quad City Automatic Coast, to Coast Hardware and Sprinkler Finance his hobby. As time went on, Frank possesses around 100 vintage motorbikes and constructed a unique warehouse to keep his valuables gathering. He is a Sturgeis competitor. In South Dakota, motorcycle rallies are held annually. One of the most significant occasions in the biker group, and has historically been esteemed in the field, even prior to his prominence on television. What makes Frank separate is not the quantity of things he possesses, but how he goes about them. He possesses what he refers to as a picker's eye, the capacity to recognize worth in things that others think it's worthless. Throughout the years, Frank has entered the realm of dusty warehouses, carefully observing the origin and placement of every item, constantly interested in the lives of those who were their owners. He is not only a gatherer, he preserves history, a guardian of memories that shall die forgotten. Even so, his duties as a firefighter. The majority of the inspector's time is spent silently. Frank's enthusiasm seeps into each examination. The historic structures he visits frequently uncover hidden gems, from old fire helmets for manual firefighting sirens for outdated firefighting apparatus. To Frank, these things aren't simply outdated apparatus, but artifacts from a different time. He is able to locate these finds like a hunter traveling to discover fascinating historical tales. Music. Frank considered every construction inspection to be beyond a job. It was an adventure. Behind the fire rules and safety reports provide a chance to unearth forgotten past. Two seemingly incompatible roles, a meticulous examiner during the day and ardent collector during the day, had combined, producing a man with a sharp eye and uncommon sensitivity. It was his job as an inspector who sharpened Frank's skills in pay attention to every little detail, including brick, a fragment of wood, and a dust particle on a ceiling. He became proficient in reading a structure like an ancient book full of historical and temporal clues. Additionally, that talent became crucial in his search for treasures lost, from dusty antique stores to warehouses. Frank never wavered. He had a plan. Years of looking in shadowy areas and recognizing possible threats aided him. Recognize worth that others have missed. When he entered an area crowded with ancient, he didn't see any clutter. He observed potential. And that ability would eventually become the key to his transformation into the essence of American pickers. The pivotal moment resulted from an apparently unimportant thing. Frank only paid for it $15 before selling it for $475. However, more significant than the cash, it was when Frank came to a realization worthwhile. He knew more than merely a passion. It was actually valuable. It was the acknowledgement that years of investigation, analysis, and gathering had not been in vain. After that, gathering was no longer merely a pastime, but a career with promise and a professional route. Frank made a daring choice in 2002. He left his reliable position as a fire inspector and started Frank's Finds, his own store, in Savannah, Illinois, a small town. However, this store is not like any other. It's similar to a living museum, a location that houses not only oddball antiques, but also memories and ghosts of the past. In a former opera house featuring an old-fashioned pub, the store resembles a time capsule. A few may complain that it's cluttered or musty, but that's what Frank finds so unvarnished, genuine and unmistakable. In this case, each thing is exhibited and has a unique tale, as though anticipating a listener. Frank's Finds has developed into allocation for serious collectors and both inquisitive tourists, although not. Everyone is aware of the store's distinctive arrangement. Those who comprehend Frank's vision may recognize the value he expertly kept intact. This is where Frank's next. There was a significant breakthrough. When watching TV, he didn't have to do anything when they knocked. He simply had to be himself. A man who observed where others saw trash there was treasure. A male who thought that each and every item had a tale, no matter how dusty and ancient. Revealing. Prior to American Pickers becoming Mike Wolfe is a television phenomenon. Traveled the nation by myself with an outdated camera, in hand, searching for lost treasures. In 2002 or thereabouts, Mike was recording his journey, his lengthy Frank Fritz, a friend, was beginning a new chapter, leaving his position as a firefighter inspector to launch a vintage store named Frank's Discoveries in the tiny community of Savannah, Illinois. Frank was happy, with a peaceful existence, surrounded by antique motorbikes, corroded oil cans, and vintage toys with a timestamp on them. To him, it was not merely a store. It was a separate universe where everything had a narrative. Mike's vision was different. He felt that their quests for treasure had the capacity to develop into something larger. In his dream, a television program where rubbish would be revitalized, and its creators rejoiced. However, Frank paused. He cherished his store, a location of safety, stability, and total inclusion. Then one day, destiny knocked. Frank purchased a tiny pin from a few pupils for $115s. Nobody anticipated that he would sell it for $150. It was more than just a deal. It was a wake-up call. Frank contrasted it with the excitement of gambling, a significant victory that made his blood boils. That sensation combined with, finally, Mike's perseverance persuaded, yes, Frank said. He shut down the store, gathered some familiar items, and hit the road alongside Mike. Two companions, a truck as well as a desire for the past. The initial rough yet honest clips were captured, the eye of producers. Next, in January 2010, American Pickers was released. Everything was different. Frank the suddenly quiet man was a familiar face. Face to weekly audiences of millions. More than 3 people watched the first episode. Millions of people among the greatest History Channel premieres that were successful past. With his trademark beard, robust physique, and composed manner, Frank stood in stark contrast to Mike, towering, lively, and gregarious. The audience adored them as a perfect fit for contrast, like 2 people complementing each other, ideal components for a puzzle. The fans began to follow. That year, in October, they went to the Surf Museum in California and were greeted by a large waiting audience outside. Surprised, Frank inquired, What are all of these individuals doing here? However, he paused to sign each person's autograph, one after another, until none remained. 8 months after its debut, 5.3 million views were made of the program. Frank was formally a star. The journeys were still impulsive. They were in a white Mercedes Ford Transit, later a Sprinter. No script, no strategy, only roads, wheels, and an ending further. September 2011, while traversing southern Maine, they made a visit to Champion Auto in Arundel. Mario Burnett, the proprietor, was startled to discover the 2 TV celebrities standing in his backyard. Frank right away fell in love with oil and the ancient signs, cans and mementos from petrol stations. Mike searched for motorbike equipment. They remained. 5 days there. No screenplay, just heeding their gut feelings and the unknown tales from the journey. That's the secret of the American Pickers. One friend, 2 vehicle journeying back in time, not to locate pricey goods, but to learn neglected items, give them life, inanimate items, and rejoice each day music tales. Mike enjoys riding vintage motorcycles and vintage Volkswagens, but Frank is more interested in motorcycles, oil cans, and toy souvenirs. As they search through the contrasts at Mario's residence in Menhir unambiguous, Mike is engrossed in items related to motorcycles, while Frank is drawn to vintage signs at petrol stations. They fit like pieces of a puzzle that fit together flawlessly. Mike once explained Frank as an idealist, perceptive, humorous, and considerate. Viewers perceive that unique vibe as well, and they adore the strange but appropriate contrast between the two. Some spectators adore Frank's cautious, serene manner, but some are attracted to Mike's decisive, fast-paced manner. That balance increases the show's relatability and sympathetic. Frank's enthusiasm for motorcycles when he was a teenager. Purchased his first Harley-Davidson in 1964, a choice that might have caused his parents, but it marked the start of a travel. As time has gone by, Frank has accumulated a collection of approximately 35 vintage motorcycles meticulously kept in a mini museum that is also a warehouse. There are numerous rare items in the collection. Indians, particularly a 4-cylinder model from 1938, which he discovered in a Philadelphia storage facility. Additionally, Frank owns British bicycles, Triumphs, BSA, Vincent, and the majority, particularly the 1942 Von Dutch Savoy Volkswagen-framed Harley, and created by the renowned artist Von Dutch himself. The bike was the only one Frank had seen in periodicals and was shocked to discover it at a garage sale. Frank believes that each bike has a narrative, which is what distinguishes them unique. In 2013, he revealed his information by penning a book, How to Choose Vintage Motorbikes. This isn't a dry guide for professionals, but an approachable and appeal to all antique enthusiasts' motorcycles or wishes to begin collecting them travel. Book is full of advice, tales, and images from his personal encounters. From identifying a deal, successfully bargain to choose how to identify a gem's hidden worth in the row. The way that Frank writes is as simple, light-hearted, and genuine as his character on screen. Frank was 25 years as a fire inspector, a position that opened his eyes to other collectors are only able to imagine. Forgotten fire stations, vintage, machinery, and leather brass extinguishers, helmets, and antiquated alarm systems. He gathers doing everything he can, transforming his previous work journeys into chances to gather fragments of the history of firefighting. At any time he finds something connected to Frank's former position on American Pickers' Eyes Brighton. It's not merely an area of proficiency. It's a personal item, recall. Frank's perspective extends beyond his heart instead of his eyes. He observes the narrative, the past, the events behind every item. On the program, he spends more time conversing with vendors regarding the item's history, rather than attempting to bargain. He is particularly struck by objects that demonstrate how Americans once lived. From crude implements, ancient, from home goods to oddball toys, Frank has long held war in high regard, souvenirs. Actually, if he finds objects pertaining to fallen troops, he's ready to give them to museums instead, then hold on to them for music himself. There is a man named Frank who can see more than the tangible worth of old things. He senses the past they elicit. For Frank, the backstories, every piece is something to cherish and not forgotten, but kept. However, behind taking center stage, Frank Fritz has been facing a war in silence that not many people understand. Over the course of 36 years, he possesses Crohn's disease, a persistent, excruciating, and incapacitating illness that interferes with day-to-day activities challenging, particularly while filming of the American Pickers television series. His close friend disclosed that Frank started with the illness when he was in the 25-30 age range. In spite of the Frank continued to appear despite his ongoing pain, frequently on TV, making people happy millions of people who watched, although his own pain was never revealed and his life stabilized only slowly after he gave up drinking and resolved to keep sobriety. But years of strain in his physique had been slowly weakened by disease. Frank's condition had gotten worse, and, at one time, his body was unable to manage. Frank passed away at the age of 60. Many were taken aback by the magnitude of the hardships he had experienced during his years of quiet battle. It wasn't until 2017 when the general public started to find out about his turbulent life that Frank was stopped by police last year for driving in the incorrect direction. He acknowledged to consuming alcohol and using Xanax, a medication that is prescribed to relieve anxiety. A field sobriety test revealed that he was accused of operating a vehicle under the impact. Later on, he disclosed that his anxiety resulted from experiencing continuously observed and evaluated at every turn. Being constantly watched led to a great deal of stress. Frank escaped going to jail, simply entering a guilty plea, yet his reputation had suffered severe harm. Behind Frank Fritz, who smiles on TV, is a man laden with injuries, both bodily and mental, that not many people actually comprehend. Do you feel sorry for he was under severe pressure? Share your opinions in the comments area. Additionally, remember to like, share, and to continue. Please subscribe to the channel, finding more sincere and poignant tales. Music. That instance appeared to raise the curtain, demonstrating that notoriety is not only worn Frank out, but also transformed him personally. His intimate connections lowly with co-star Mike Wolfe broken. By 2021, Frank acknowledged it had been 2 years since they had last spoken. Years. The thing that wounded him the most was not the silence, but the loss of his employment. Following his back procedure, Mike did not make any touch with him. Frank believed that the show was consistently skewed, viewing Mike as he was merely a sidekick to the headliner. He even likened it to being a member of a band, with the lead singer being Steven Tyler. No one ever pays attention to you. When Mike wrote a message of condolence regarding Frank's well-being, Frank did not think it was genuine. He assumed it could have been written by someone else. In his heart, he thought Mike wouldn't say anything admirable about him in person. But following years of separation and tension, the two eventually reconnected in Memorial Day weekend in May 2023. A mutual friend was crucial to bringing them together. However, the harm wasn't finished. When the pandemic struck, a mutual friend was crucial to bringing them together. However, the harm wasn't finished. When the pandemic struck, Frank hurt his back as he was moving something heavy in the house. He required surgery, but the timing was off. Isolation, lockdown, and psychological well-being come together. At that point, Frank began to turn to opioids. At first, he utilized them to control the discomfort, but it became out of control. Command. According to Mike Wolfe, it was observing someone being destroyed by a cyclone. Individuals attempted to step in, setting up a gathering to persuade Frank to attend rehabilitation. Frank maintained that he was all right, but he was disintegrating inside. As soon as the show want Frank's return, they demanded that he clear a drug test. Regretfully, he was unsuccessful. That was the last blow that put an end to Frank's pickers in America. His most recent episode aired March 2020. At first, many believed all he needed was a little time off to heal. Frank even maintained that he never formally left. All he required was back surgery. Next, the CO-19 epidemic music struck. Finally, in July 2021, Micah verified that Frank would not be going back to the show. Mike shared a short note of well wishes for Frank. However, that message was accompanied by a lot more intricate tale. Frank had experienced extensive procedure involving 185 stitches, and 2 rods of metal were placed into his back. Despite his assertion that he was completely recuperated and prepared to resume work, the network had other ideas. They choose not to extend an invitation to return. Additionally, this decision had a significant impact on the spirit of Frank. He felt abandoned and shoved aside. After that, his health kept on degrade. Frank's life took a terrible turn. On July 14, 2022, in the morning. A friend came to his Iowa farm and discovered him on the ground, incapable of speaking and unresponsive. The companion dialed 911 right away, believing that Frank could be experiencing a convulsion. At the age of 59, Frank had experienced enormous stroke. Physicians hurried him to the hospital, but the damage to his brain washed most of Frank's capacity for both movement and clear thought. While in the hospital for a month, he was moved into a nursing facility in order to keep getting better. This was only the start of an arduous and protracted battle in order to survive. Even when Frank was at last able to return home, he needed ongoing attention. His health kept getting better, decline, resulting in several calls for emergencies. An important incident about pneumonia returned him to the hospital. Following several weeks in the hospital, Frank was evidently no longer capable of handling his own finances or life. This formerly self-sufficient individual was now unable to look after himself and confront the unquestionable repercussions of his lengthy struggle with health. By August 2022, the court intervened and designated Chris Davis, Frank's close friend, to present him when he makes decisions for himself. Additionally, a bank was chosen to oversee his assets, which were estimated to be worth $6 million. According to court filings, Frank couldn't take care of himself, incapable of supplying housing, food, or basic health care. Without help, he could have been hurt or killed. With ongoing judicial oversight, each choice the Guardian makes, and the bank was closely watched. Every year, judges would check in to make sure that Frank was receiving the care he needed, putting additional strain on his already challenging circumstance. In terms of money, even though Frank has earned millions of dollars from his savings, American pickers were swiftly exhausted. His healthcare costs totaled around $30,000 a month or greater than $350,000 annually, despite the fact that he had revenue from investments of only roughly $60,000 annually, which was insufficient to pay for the costs of his intensive care required. Frank needed nursing care around-the-clock care, specific medical apparatus, physical therapy, as well as care for severe illnesses like Crohn's and COPD. The financial strain got to be too much, because it was evident that the expenses could not be maintained over time. Jerry Jandro, Frank's close friend, indicated that there had been conversations regarding selling Frank's antiquities at auction upon his passing. Jerry thought that the concept would be supported by Frank's fan base. Frank's health kept becoming worse. Jerry revealed that each visit was devastating. Frank's body, on one side, was totally broken. He attempted to raise his hand, but it simply dropped. Jerry remembered with unfathomable music sorrow. Even more excruciating was that Frank knew exactly what was occurring to him. He was aware of how broken he was, incapable of speaking as he formerly did, incapable of moving or altering his conditions. Jerry thought that Frank was no longer willing to fight. When individuals grow weary, he claimed, they frequently lose the will to survive. I firmly believe he could have survived longer if he had persisted, Jerry told. Then the last call was made. Mike Wolfe, on September 30th, 2024. Frank's longtime American co-star Pickers was informed that Frank's health. The situation has gotten worse. Mike hurried over to his side right away. He spent an hour with Frank, rubbing his chest with his hand and speaking to him in a whisper. It was the last, a consoling moment, a sad farewell to a bond that had influenced both of their lives. I assured him that I wasn't upset with him, Mike stated. I declared my love for him. Simply prior to Frank's final breath, Mike whispered to him one last message. Go, look for your mum. Go look for her. Go. At 8:50 Frank passed dead at p.m. Mike was present, retaining the hand of his companion till the very finish. Her dearest friend and Frank's mother, additionally, Annette Overbelander, was by his side. Later, Annette revealed that Mike never ceased supporting Frank during his hardships. He was present for him in his dying hours, as Mike and Frank have always wished. When in September, Frank Fritz passed away, nobody could have anticipated what 2024 would bring, would be found behind the old garage door. Out of the public's sight for a long time, Frank's motorbike, the collection was just amazing. Additional, about 75 classic motorcycles, all of which have a little of history and its own tale. Some appear to have simply rolled off the manufacturing floor, whereas others are protected, waiting a moment in rust and dust chance. The earliest bicycle was made in 1912, and uncommon prototypes are among them that specialists say have been lost to time. The majority of individuals are unaware about Frank's remarkable assortment, and just a few close pals are aware of what he has been staying undercover. However, as word of collectors, his collection grew, and everywhere, museums are thriving. Professionals claim that it might be among the most significant motorbike discoveries in decades. The collection's specifics enhance the amazing tale. One motorbike, a 1922 Ace form, was bought for just $45,000 for a special episode of The Real Worth of American Pictures increased dramatically since then. The findings add to the enigma surrounding Frank's hidden cash. The 1922 Ace 4 is now almost $200,000 in value. Among the collection's other highlights is A Indian 4, also known as the Aristocrat, in 1939, which is more valuable than $115,000 in total. Frank also has a number of Indian Scouts before the war, featuring a 1928 model with its original coating undamaged. In addition, he possesses 3 1950 panheads, Harley Davidsons, in different phases of repair. But the most unexpected finding is a 1947 Indian Chief, a unique prototype. The bike's design is not like any other model I've ever seen, and experts think its value may be higher, over $4 million. However, Frank's collection is full with obscure music marvels. The bikes are accompanied by dozens of handwritten journals, meticulously kept for more than 30 years. Frank has recorded everything, starting with the beginnings of every bike, who previously owned it, to the components he needed to procure. He even explains the challenges of repairing bikes, the extended time spent in the workshop, and the contentment of getting a bike to roar at last. He occasionally includes personal annotations, considering his feelings for a specific ride, or what that ride has reminded him of. These journals have changed Frank's collection from being just mechanical items to a significant narrative, and that makes it appealing to collectors, even more worthwhile. When the whole experts estimate that the collection is complete, that it might be worth much more than $2 million, while some think it could bring around up to $3 million at the auction, particularly with Frank's name associated with everything. The demand from auctioneers for the possibility of selling the collection, not due to the vintage motorcycles alone, but since it's an opportunity to get a piece of American history meticulously conserved by a person who genuinely comprehends its worth. The collection is now a legacy, and the desire for it is indicative of the significant influence that Frank's enthusiasm has affected the world of collecting. However, Frank's passion for history extends beyond motorcycles. Located within the grounds of, initially, the estate is an old vehicle that a quick look could appear not very noteworthy. But it's not your typical truck. The van Aerosmith was the same one.